In 1750, a London aristocrat wouldn't fear a pickpocket or a highwayman nearly as much as they feared a bucket of water. Today, we view a daily shower as the baseline of human dignity, but for the Georgian elite, plunging into water was considered a direct invitation to the grave. They didn't avoid bathing because they were lazy. They avoided it because they were convinced that water was a lethal delivery system for disease. Why would a society obsessed with powdered wigs and silk waistcoats treat soap and water like a biological weapon? The answer lies in a terrifying medical misconception that ruled London for generations. In the mid-18th century, the prevailing belief was that water softened the skin, opening the pores and allowing the miasma, the foul, invisible vapors believed to carry plague and disease, to seep directly into the bloodstream. To a nobleman in 1750, a bath wasn't a luxury, it was a voluntary suicide attempt. They believed that by keeping a thick layer of oil, sweat and grime on their skin, they were effectively sealing their bodies against the death floating in the air. This wasn't just a quirky superstition, it was a systemic lifestyle choice. Think about the physical reality of a London mansion in the middle of a hot July. You have velvet drapes, heavy brocade furniture, and men and women wearing layers of wool and silk, all sweating into their clothes for weeks at a time. Because they believed water was dangerous, they replaced washing with dry cleaning, rubbing the skin with dry cloths and heavily perfuming their undergarments. They thought they were staying clean, but they were actually creating a living, breathing petri dish. The consequence? An olfactory landscape so intense it's difficult for a modern American to even comprehend. When diplomats from cleaner climates visited London, they didn't just mention the smell, they wrote journals describing it as a physical weight that hit you at the door. But the truly jarring part is that this wasn't seen as dirty, it was seen as safe. A nobleman who smelled of rancid sweat and heavy floral perfume was, by the standards of 1750, a responsible, cautious individual. Now here is the loop that keeps this cycle of filth spinning. The more they smelled, the more they used heavy perfumes. The more they used perfumes, the more they felt they didn't need to wash because the smell was masked. It was a complete breakdown of logic, and it was guarded by the highest levels of society. If a doctor had suggested a hot bath to a duke in 1750, he might have been laughed out of the room as a reckless amateur. There is a dark, almost comedic irony in how they handled this. They were terrified of internal disease, yet they lived in a state of constant external decay. They would spend a fortune on extravagant wigs, which we know were breeding grounds for lice, and then wonder why they were suffering from constant skin irritations and mysterious fevers. They blamed the weather, the humours, and the alignment of the stars, never once suspecting that the very solution to their problems was sitting right there in the Thames, filtered and boiled. For the American perspective, this is where the history hits hard. We look at their grand architecture and their intellectual enlightenment, and we assume they were like us, but without the internet. But they weren't. They were operating under a completely different framework of existence. Their fear of water was so deep that even the most civilized people in the world were literally rotting in their own clothes, convinced that they were perfectly clean. The social pressure to conform to this dry lifestyle was immense. To be known as someone who bathed frequently was to be labelled a hypochondriac, or worse, a person of low moral character who was obsessed with their physical body rather than their spiritual or intellectual standing. It was a status symbol to be so unconcerned with your own hygiene that you could walk through a ballroom without worrying about what a little sweat might do to your protected cause. The reality of 1750 London was a society trapped in a paradox. They built a massive global empire, yet they couldn't conquer the simple task of cleaning their own skin. They feared the water because they thought it would kill them, never realizing that their fear of the water was the very thing ensuring their health was constantly under siege. The story of the Georgian aversion to bathing isn't just a gross historical anecdote, it's a warning about how easily institutionalized fear can override basic common sense. They weren't idiots, they were people who had been taught a lie so effectively that they died for it. They lived in a golden age of fashion while carrying the weight of a filth-induced nightmare, all because they were too scared to take a step into the tub. So, the next time you think about the refined world of the 18th century, forget the polished silver and the elegant dancing.
Think about the itching, the hidden vermin, and the terrifying, pungent reality of a society that thought the safest place to be was covered in a week's worth of oil and grime. They didn't hate being clean, they just loved being alive, and they were willing to pay a very smelly price to stay that way.